Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Happy Wednesday to everybody. I'm very excited for this episode that I have for you tonight. I've been trying to link up with this guy for a couple of weeks now, but of course, anybody who's married or with kids or either knows that it's not easy to link up with people when you have work schedules and holidays and everything else. But I have a Notre Dame fan on the line. His name is Always Irish, and I really encourage everybody out there who's watching this video, whether you're a Notre Dame fan or just a college football fan or a Clemson fan especially, to go check out this guy's YouTube channel. I came across it a couple of weeks ago, and I went and watched a few episodes of what he had uploaded, and I was very impressed. He's very knowledgeable, both about Notre Dame and about college football, and it seems to be very non-biased, which is hard to come across on YouTube. And I get accused of being biased all the time, which I'm definitely a Clemson homer. I'm not going to hide that, but I do try to be unbiased. And so I'm very glad to offer Always Irish to you. Always Irish, how you doing, sir?
Very well. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I'm really happy this is working out.
Yeah, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and speak with me. And we were just talking off air for a second, and he's going to try to find a way to get this circulated around his channel too, so that the Notre Dame fans that follow him can also hear everything that we have to talk about today. Now, what I want to do first before we get into... Now, I know a lot of people want to hear about the Cotton Bowl, and they want to hear probably me trashing Notre Dame and vice versa. But what I want to do first is I want to give you a quick opportunity to plug your channel. Also, let us know. I mean, how long have you been on YouTube? What is your main purpose on YouTube, and exactly what kind of videos do you make?
Sure. So the channel's called Always Irish, and I do cover all college football. I'm not quite as diverse as you, but it's primarily Notre Dame. But I do cover the playoff and a lot of big stuff happening. But really, it's interesting. I've been on for 2 years now. And I started the show in the middle of 2016 when Notre Dame was in the middle of a 4-8 miserable season. And I was losing my mind. I had no patience, and Twitter was not enough characters for me to get out what I was thinking and feeling. I heard a bunch of other podcasts, and not that many of them were telling the truth, and that entertained me. So I said, the heck with it. I'm just going to create my own channel, and if anybody likes it, they can listen.
Right. And I got to tell you, man, so when I went on your channel to check it out, I was impressed, not only because of the content, because I think that you give a lot of really good information on there, especially if you're a Notre Dame fan. He really knows the Irish very well. But I was impressed that this guy can get on the camera or the microphone and talk for an hour. And I got to tell you something. For somebody who's been doing YouTube for just over a year now, getting on a microphone and speaking at length with no interruption, with no commercial breaks, with no guests, no anything like that, for an hour straight is not easy to do. That is a talent that a lot of people don't appreciate. So I want to give you kudos for that. So to be able to hold an audience, first of all, I have the attention of a 5-year-old, and if you can hold my attention for more than 10 minutes, that's saying something. So I want to give you a lot of credit for that.
Well, I do appreciate that. It's pretty basic, really. Like, if I have an idea, I just have a little general bullet-pointed outline, and I just kind of wing it from there, and an hour breezes by. Yeah,
I believe me, I'm the same way. And you get off on a tangent, and you get into something that you really care about, and it makes it easy. It makes the time fly.
Exactly.
All right, so let's go ahead and dive. So I have a few questions for you.
Sure.
I was just telling you off air that I don't know any Notre Dame fans personally. Now, the area of the country I live in southeastern South Carolina on the coast, in the Charleston area. It's sort of a melting pot of people here. I mean, my neighbors range from Notre Dame to Alabama fans to Southern California fans to Texas fans. It's sort of a hodgepodge of football fans where I live, just because of the economics of the area I live in. But I do live in SEC country. I do live in ACC country. But I don't get a lot of interaction with Notre Dame fans. Now, I come on YouTube a lot. I've done several videos over the time I've been on YouTube about Notre Dame, and I've never really like, I'm not one of these people that hates Notre Dame because they're Notre Dame, and because I don't hate Notre Dame because they're a big faction, a storied program, and the way that some people hate Ohio State or Alabama or places like that. My biggest gripe with Notre Dame has always been their independence, and it's not because they're independent. Don't get me wrong. Believe me, they're free to do what they want and be happy about it. That's fine. But being that I'm an ACC guy, a Clemson guy, I think, in my opinion, that Notre Dame is sort of raking the ACC over the coals. As a matter of fact, actually, I want to rephrase that and say that the ACC is letting Notre Dame rake them over the coals, because correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are in the ACC as far as basketball and baseball, right?
Correct.
Okay, but not football.
Correct.
And so you guys play 70% ACC schedule in football. You play 5 ACC teams a year. But we don't see, the ACC doesn't necessarily see the financial benefit of Notre Dame being in the ACC. And I understand the argument. They say with the deal with was it NBC, the TV deal where that every home game is broadcast nationally on NBC. And my feelings about that are very well known, that back when they made that deal, that was a very lucrative deal for Notre Dame. But nowadays, with the cable TV the way it is, with the internet and ESPN3 and all the different ways you can take in college football week by week, it's not such a lucrative deal for Notre Dame anymore. And not only that, this is really what I really want to ask you, because this is the thing that I really want to know from a real Notre Dame fan. First of all, how do you feel about Notre Dame being independent? Number one. Number two, how do you feel this affects your chance at being in the playoff as a one-loss team? Because you're undefeated this year, but maybe next year you won't be, or the year after that you might have a loss. And in my opinion, that's going to keep you out simply because you don't have the conference championship game to fall back on. So how do you feel about all of that?
Well, these are super relevant topics you're bringing up, and some of these are issues that I've talked about in recent videos as well. I would also like to add, I did watch your final playoff rankings kind of podcast, and just for the record, I agree with everything you said about all of it, which is rare for me. But your rationale and everything after the rankings came out, I could not disagree with anything you said. So I want to throw that out there. I'm right there with you on your thoughts on how it all played out.
Right.
So a couple things here. One, I think you're right about the TV deal. Okay, back in the day, Notre Dame almost landed Randy Moss, and they said, "Randy, why you want to go to Notre Dame?" And he said, "I want to be on TV."
Yeah.
Okay, so it goes all the way back to where not everybody was on TV.
Right.
And so Notre Dame had that deal with NBC and got, a lot of coverage that way. Now things are changing, and financially, Notre Dame actually makes less money from TV than they would if they were in the ACC full time.
Right.
So this decision now is not really related to TV revenue. They would make more money getting a share out of the ACC pool than they would doing it this way. So that's an antiquated reason to stick to your independence, in my opinion.
Right.
Now, as it gets to this partial membership deal, I got a feeling that Notre Dame probably didn't want to do it at all for football, but they wanted all their other men's and women's sports to be able to be in the ACC, and this was some sort of middle ground they could come to. That's kind of the feeling I have.
Right.
Because I don't think Notre Dame values its football independence, and they have certain rivalries they are not willing to give up. They want to play USC every year. They want to play Stanford every year. Navy did Notre Dame a favor in World War II and kept the school from being shut down. As a thank you, they're going to play them every year.
Yeah.
And so they don't want to give up those rivalries. And so that's how I think they kind of ended up with this semi-agreement with the ACC that's just kind of met halfway for both parties.
Yeah.
I
so I'm going to stop you there just because you touched on something that I forgot about. So the rivalry situation, is there not a way in your mind, because I think that there is, that they could join the ACC or the Big Ten or wherever. Because I hear a lot of people saying they should join the Big Ten, geographically and all that. But I think if they do join a conference, it will be the ACC because they already have an affiliation with them.
I agree with that.
And but anyway, that's besides the point. Being the fact that the ACC is only relegated right now to play 8 conference games and not 9, like the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or the Big 10, is there a way, I think that there is, where you can keep those rivalry games, especially with USC and Stanford? Now, Navy is a different ball game. That one would be the one probably that would get left by the wayside. But
that's fine with me. For the record, I hate the Navy game.
Yeah.
I'll be fine. I am totally fine. Listen, there's no benefit for Notre Dame.
Yeah, no.
There's no benefit.
No, I agree.
If they win, you get no credit because you beat a military school, and if you lose, your season's over and you get made fun of. There's no benefit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But my point here is, I think that with 8 conference games and then still playing USC and Stanford, which are your 2 main yearly rivalries, right?
Yeah.
That there's still a way to make that happen and join a conference. So I think that the rivalry conversation, because you just brought up something that I do hear a lot from Notre Dame fans online, is that I think that's sort of a played out excuse at this point. I mean, really, drop the Navy game, but you can still keep the other 2.
Okay,
listen,
so
a lot of schools have multiple rivalries. Clemson has them. So.
Okay, but here's the way I look at this. Then, if you don't think it's a bit much to ask if, say, you had 8 or 9 conference games in the ACC? What is it? 8?
It's 8 right now. Yeah.
Okay, so if you have 8 of those, and then you have 4 other games, Notre Dame's going to schedule Southern Cal, Stanford, Michigan, Georgia, Navy. And then everybody else doing that's going to schedule Central nobody, and then maybe one brand name. I think that's a lot to ask.
Well, no.
Agree?
So here's the thing, though. So Clemson plays 8 conference games. We also play South Carolina. That's our in-state rival. That's an SEC school. Now you can say that's a bad team, but I mean South Carolina, more than likely is not going to be a pushover. They're normally a ranked team.
Right.
And then every single year, at least since Dabo's been there, we schedule another home and home with another SEC school. It's been Auburn, at Texas A&M. We have Georgia coming up, LSU. So we're scheduling big boy schools in the SEC outside of our South Carolina rivalry, and then we play Furman and Nobody State or whatever. But Notre Dame could be in the same situation. They could still play. A 8-game ACC schedule, schedule Southern Cal, schedule Stanford. Now, if they wanted to go out and schedule somebody like Georgia, like they're doing, and then maybe one cupcake school, that's fine. Now, listen, first of all, you're preaching to the choir when it comes to the cupcakes. I don't like them. Even for Clemson, I don't like them. I understand why they do it. I don't like it, but it is what it is. And so, but nobody's making Notre Dame schedule Georgia out of conference. Now, I understand since they're independent, that's sort of something that they have to do now. But if they were in a conference, that wouldn't be something that they would absolutely have to do.
Right, but I think it's something that they think is important and that they never shy away from. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, oh, Notre Dame never plays anybody. It's like, well, we try to. Like this year we played Southern Cal, Michigan, Virginia Tech, Stanford. It's not really Notre Dame's fault. None of those teams were that great this year. All you could do is schedule the big brand names, and then you show up, and you hope they show up.
Yeah.
But I think they don't want to get boxed in and have very little flexibility to branch out, and I think that's the big thing. But I think what's more important is your final point. And Notre Dame fans even do not like me saying this. But what I've been saying is, you're exactly right. Notre Dame's not making the playoff with 1 loss until it maybe goes to 8.
Right.
But if it stays at 4, Notre Dame's out.
Exactly.
Notre Dame's out. And here's what I tell people that are mad that Notre Dame didn't have to play a 13th game and they made it. Here's what I've been telling those people. This is a double-edged sword for Notre Dame. It is good and it is bad the way it's set up now with the 4-team playoff. If we go undefeated, catch some breaks with some big brand name teams that didn't have good years, go 12-0, it's to Notre Dame's benefit then to be sitting at home eating cheeseburgers while everybody plays the last week. Next year, if we have one loss and we're sitting at home and one of those teams wins with one loss, we're out. And so I tell these people that are out of losing their minds this year, you won't be saying that next year when Notre Dame has one loss, doesn't play a 13th game, and they're out.
Absolutely.
So it's a give and a take. It's good and bad. And for 1 year, people could deal with Notre Dame, see how they do. But it's very rare we're going to go undefeated, so I wouldn't worry about it long term. you know, that's how I'd put it. But with one loss in this format, the only way they get in is if every other one-loss team loses on championship weekend.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it.
So I guess what I'm at. So we agree on that. So I guess what
100%, I agree with
what
that,
I'm asking is, as a Notre Dame fan, and I know that you don't speak for all of Notre Dame fans, because believe me, I don't speak for all Clemson fans. There's plenty of Clemson fans come on my channel and tell me how stupid I am and how they disagree. But as a Notre Dame fan, I'll put it this way. I'll just be frank with you. Would you like to see Notre Dame join a conference for the reasons that you just stated as far as the playoff goes?
I don't think I would, just as a victim of lifelong tradition.
Right.
And value. Here's the other thing I value. I like the fact that Notre Dame has to play some years a team from every different major conference.
Yeah.
They got to fly all over God's green America. Not only that, but then they have to adapt to the style of play for each of these different conferences and find a way to match up and play them, okay? And
right.
That's something Notre Dame fans like and we're used to, and we value that. Now, the tricky part is, how much do you value that if it's going to start locking you out of playoff opportunities?
That's the question.
Right? Like that's where I feel like this conversation has to get super real, because how much do you want to hold on to that if you're going to keep getting locked out with one loss but having an otherwise good year? Yeah. So that's where it's going to get tricky. Now, here's what's come up the last 2 weeks is they're talking about an early expansion to 8. Now, I think that could change things a little bit to where Notre Dame could get one of those, 6, 7, 8 at-large bids with one loss.
That's a great point, because I didn't even think about that. If it expands to 8, which it's going to, whether it's an early expansion or it wants to 2020.
That's just a matter of time. There's too much money on the table for everybody involved.
That's a great point. I didn't even think about that, because with the expansion, that gives Notre Dame all the fuel it needs to remain independent. I didn't even think about that. That's a great point.
But I'm telling you, on my Twitter profile I'm almost followed by everybody who's a lunatic Notre Dame fan like I am. And when I bring up the point that if you really want to have more chances at the playoff, the quickest path is to join a conference, that does not go over well. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm just stating that that's the fact. And people just they want their independence. They do.
And believe me, as an outsider looking in, listen. First of all, I want to say I completely understand. If I take off my Clemson hat and I just put on my college football hat, I completely understand that Notre Dame fans are proud of the tradition. I mean, because Notre Dame is in the top 3 traditions in all of football. There's no question about that. Nobody can dispute that. And I get it. I get that being independent is some sort of feather in your cap. There's nobody that's been independent that's achieved what Notre Dame has over the years. But as a fan of somebody who wants to win national titles in the modern age, especially in the playoff system, which has only been around for 5 years now, if I'm a Notre Dame fan, I'm sitting there going, I feel like we need to. Whether you like it or not, we need to conform here and join a conference, because I don't want to be the second best team in America one year and get left out just because we're not in a conference. So I see your point, but as somebody who's trying to put my feet in the shoes of a Notre Dame fan, I feel like it's a losing battle unless we go to 8, in which
here's what I think. I think this would be a much more real conversation if there was no light at the end of the tunnel to 8.
Right.
Then I think you have to get more serious about it. Now, here's the other issue too. If, say, Georgia had beat Alabama Okay, let's go down this path. Say Georgia had beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. In that scenario, the playoff committee could have bumped Notre Dame out and essentially said, you better join the ACC if they wanted to.
Yeah.
That was another possibility that Notre Dame fans were worried about is if they really wanted to force Notre Dame's hand, all they got to do is say, you're out.
Yeah.
You're out.
I mean, I guess that's a possibility. I don't think that was going to happen, and we can, I mean, disagree. I'm sure people.
I didn't think it was likely, but if they really wanted to prove a point, I think that would have opened up an avenue for them to be able to rationalize it.
Yeah, and so that's a good segue into this into the next thing I want to ask you, because I don't know how many of my videos you've seen, especially since the playoffs have been announced, but I have been on here screaming at the top of my lungs. As much as I don't like Notre Dame being independent, and for the reason I just stated as far as the ACC goes, Notre Dame absolutely belongs in the playoffs. Even if Georgia did beat Alabama, even if Ohio State didn't lose to Purdue, whatever scenario you want to paint, period, a 12-0 football team that plays 10 Power 5 teams a year, a Power 5 schedule all over the country like Notre Dame does, belongs in the playoffs. I don't care what anybody says. And I've been fighting with people online, which I should know better than to do by now, but I do it anyway because I'm an idiot, is that Notre Dame's overrated. They're going to get murdered in the playoffs no matter who they play. And I just do not believe that. Listen, you already know, nothing would make me happier than... Now, I will say this. I did want Clemson to play at Notre Dame because I think that they have a better chance against Notre Dame than Alabama in the first round of the playoffs. But nothing would make me happier than to watch Clemson go out there and beat Notre Dame 50-0. But I don't think that's going to happen. I've watched, probably 7 at least full games live of Notre Dame play this year, and they are a legit football team. They are a legit top 4 team. I think that where they're ranked number 3 is exactly where they should be, behind Clemson and Alabama, and certainly ahead of Oklahoma. And so I don't subscribe to the fact that just because they're not in a conference, they don't belong there, or the lazy thing that all people say, and they say the same thing about Clemson too. So this isn't just about Notre Dame, is that they haven't played anybody. Well, how many schools out there go out of their way? And I know Notre Dame does this because they're independent and because they're not in a conference, but to schedule a USC and and 5 ACC schools and a Stanford and a Michigan, I mean, nobody does that. Only Notre Dame does that. It's not Notre Dame's fault that USC, who's normally pretty good, sucked this year. It's not Notre Dame's fault that Stanford, who's normally really good, sucked this year. It's not Notre Dame's fault that Florida State, who's normally a top 5 program in America for the past 30 years, sucked this year. It's not Notre Dame's fault that Virginia Tech, who was a top 15 program coming into this season, sucked this year. So all they did was beat everybody on their schedule. And do you know how hard it is to go 12-0 in a Power 5 schedule? I mean, it's virtually impossible. It only happens maybe once every year, if that. So what Notre Dame did this year, despite the fact that they had some close wins against some marginal teams, they still won the games. That's all. That's the point, is to win the games, and they absolutely belong there, and they absolutely can beat Clemson. For anybody who's listening, they absolutely can. It's not some cupcake walk to the national championship. For anybody who's thinking that, they're delusional.
You see, this is the reason that I wanted to do your show. You know, and I found it, and like you did with me, I listened to some of the episodes, and you're very fair and balanced. And you just covered a couple of the things that I wanted to ask you about, because like you were telling me before the show, you know, you're down in the Carolinas, and I'm up here in the Chicago area, and the fan base is just, I'm just not around a lot of Clemson people here, you know, right. And so what I wanted to ask you was, are we even taken seriously? Like, that's an honest question. Like, not you, because you're reasonable and fair and balanced and do your research and objectively look at the information in front of you. But to the masses down south, is Notre Dame even taken seriously, or is they just laughed at as they're just little Notre Dame.
No, for the most part, Notre Dame's taken very seriously down here. And let me tell you a little story. And I've told this story a million times on my channel. I'm not going to go through the whole thing and bore everybody with the same story and over and over and over again. But I was listening to your upload that you did, I think it was yesterday or last night, and where you did a Q&A session. And one of the things that was asked on there was, what was the best game you've ever been to in your life, Notre Dame game? And that got me thinking. And so the best game I've ever been to for football, period, I've been to a bunch of NFL games and probably over a dozen Clemson games in my lifetime, was the 2015 Notre Dame Clemson game. And at the time, they were both ranked in the top 10. And I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, but I said before,
I don't want to, but I do.
I live on the coast of South Carolina, so there was a hurricane hitting, literally like where I live, the day of that game. The game was played on my birthday. My wife bought me the tickets several months before, whenever the schedule came out, because it was on my birthday, and we splurged. I don't even want to tell you how much money we spent on those tickets. But the day of the game came, and we're getting hit by a hurricane. There's flooding all over the state of South Carolina, and we're sitting there debating, me and my wife, whether or not we're going to make – I live 3 hours from Clemson. It's a 3-hour drive, and we're sitting there thinking, there's no way we can leave the house. Our house – we're going to come home. Our dog's going to be drowned, and our house is going to be flooded. But anyway, we decided to go. So that's neither here nor there. So like I said before, I've been to dozens of Clemson games in my life. When we got to Clemson, and this is a testament to Notre Dame fans, because – I've been to dozens of Clemson games, and there's always, a good showing from other fan bases. I have never seen in my life so many opposing fans at a football game than Notre Dame. The Clemson's campus was flooded with Notre Dame fans, and like I just said, it was during a hurricane. I mean, it wasn't like it was easy for these people to get there. And we spent a lot of time hanging out with Notre Dame fans, but the Notre Dame fan base is so huge throughout the country, and they are so well represented everywhere they go to play. I was impressed. I was highly impressed with the showing from the Notre Dame fans at the Clemson game, and also, we sat around a couple of Notre Dame fans, and they were really cool. But anyway, to get back to your question about how does people down the South feel about Notre Dame? We have a lot of respect for traditions like Notre Dame or Alabama or Ohio State. Now, we would love to kick their teeth in,
right.
But believe me, if you're sitting up there in Illinois thinking that people down south don't respect Notre Dame, that's couldn't be further from the truth. That's not true at all. I promise you.
Well, it's just something I think about. The last time we played Alabama in 2012, that didn't end so well for us. And sometimes I just wonder what if they really look at us and just laugh. Well,
Alabama fans are a different breed, and Clemson fans, we're new to the party. I mean, you're a blue blood. Alabama's a blue blood. Clemson's not necessarily considered to be a blue blood. So we do have respect for other teams.
And then I'd like to sit on the fan base side of this, and this is something that I do not think a lot of people outside of Notre Dame understand, or if they do understand it, respect it. And Notre Dame is not regional. Notre Dame is not, you only like Notre Dame if you live near South Bend.
No, it's a national thing. Listen, my mom's a Notre Dame fan.
Well, then good for her. I like her more than you.
But we're Irish. We're Irish.
Yeah.
So yeah, my mom loves Notre Dame.
What you have is you have all the alumni base, and then they spread out and go do whatever. But you end up with a whole batch of people called the Subway alumni, which are people who never went to school there because they're not rich enough and not smart enough, but they're Irish Catholics, and the school's values represent that. And you don't got to live near Notre Dame for that to apply to
exactly.
You.
That's why
you end up with that. Everywhere we go, there's always Notre Dame people.
That's why my mom, I grew up Irish Catholic. And so my mom loves Notre Dame, even though she's not from that area. She's from the Northeast. And so she's always loved Notre Dame. Now, she loves Clemson because she has multiple kids that went there. But, in a situation where Clemson's not playing Notre Dame, people like my mom, like you just said, that never even went to Notre Dame, love Notre Dame because they're Irish Catholic. And that's just sort of I guess I don't know if you want to call it an ethnic pride or a religious pride thing or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of call it heritage, something like that.
Yeah, right,
But
right.
But you know what's weird about that is when you have a fan base like that, that's kind of unique and really large, and everybody has their different reasons. That's how you end up with not everybody on the same page in the fan base. Meaning, like, there's still people that hate Brian Kelly. There's still people that think he's great. Like, you end up with these factions of just these big chasms between the fan base, depending on, there's just so many different reasons and for people to be involved. You end up with these intricate little idiosyncrasies within the fan base. Like, nobody ever agrees on anything with Notre Dame. Like, even from the inside, we're all over the map.
No, but that's with every fan base though. It happens with Clemson, it happens with Alabama, it happens with everybody. But I'm glad you mentioned Brian Kelly because that's going to put me right into my next bullet point here. I want to get your opinion on Brian Kelly because first of all, there's a lot of rumors that he may leave for the NFL after this year, despite whether or not Notre Dame loses in the first round or goes on to win the national championship. How do you feel about Brian Kelly? I'll give you my thoughts on him. First of all, as an outsider. I mean, I don't know why. First of all, if he leaves on his own, that's one thing. That's Brian Kelly's decision to leave, and that's one of the most high-pressure jobs. Got to be one of the hardest college football jobs, if not the hardest in all of America, because you're independent, because of where you're located, because of the tradition and the expectations there. But when I look at Brian,
Pete, it's hard to even get kids into school there. I mean, that's the other issue. Just the academics. They can't go for every kid and cast a wide net. Yeah. I mean, that's something they're always battling. Yeah,
I get that too. But so I think Brian Kelly, first of all, they'd be completely idiotic to fire the guy. I realize that, you want to make it to the playoffs every year. You want to win national championships once every few years, and that's the expectation, and that's great. But what Brian Kelly has done in modern football to recruit to Notre Dame and to get them to play at the level that they're playing, I mean, I don't know how easy it is to find a guy to do that. So, I mean, are you a fan of, first of all, that's what I'm trying to get at. Are you a fan of Brian Kelly? Would you like to see them move on from him? Would you be upset if he left or anything of that nature?
This is complicated.
Okay.
My relationship with
simplify it for me.
Oh my God. My relationship with Brian Kelly is very complicated. Okay.
Yeah.
So he came into Notre Dame. I think this is year 9, 8 or 9. Okay. And he came in, and then he had a couple years to get situated. Then 2012 hit. You go 12-0. You're coach of the year. You get blown out and embarrassed by Alabama. You get totally exposed. Okay.
Yeah.
Then there's rumors he was flirting with the Eagles, and he was going to before the game, and nobody liked that. Okay. So then that's 2012. The next few years, you have a ton of injuries, like just riddled with half the starting lineup out with injuries. You had some off-the-field issues. You had some in-the-classroom issues for a few years. Then you hit 2016, they go 4-8, okay? At that point, when you have never won a major bowl game before, you got a bunch of kids in trouble in the classroom getting kicked out and suspended, making us look bad. You got kids have legal trouble. Then you go 4-8.
Yeah.
It's time to start asking some serious questions, okay? So in the middle and after 4-8, my position was this. This was 2016. Yeah. After 4-8, I said, if you're going to go a different direction, I'm fine with it. And at this point, go for it, because this is not working. We're doing the same thing every year. It's not working. There's too much talent in the program to go 4-8. Okay?
Right.
Then they announce they're bringing Brian Kelly back. There was a period where they didn't know, and there was all these rumors.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Okay, they bring him back. So here's what I said when they brought him back. I said, if you're going to bring him back, the only way I am on board with that move is if he changes and addresses all of the major deficiencies I see in the program. And then I listed them, and there was a bunch, okay?
Right.
I said, that's the only way. But if he's going to be stubborn and keep hiring his friends who are not good coaches, having a weight and conditioning program that doesn't require kids to lift, these were real things happening, okay?
All right.
That ain't going to fly. So that was my position. in those 2 years, he's addressed every single thing that was a problem and made it better in 2 years. Every single one on my list, from recruiting to development to coaching staff to facilities to his personality, how he interacts with people, upgrading position coaches. He's addressed almost every single issue I had in a positive way.
Yeah, and I actually remember it was the beginning of last football, not this football season, but the 2017 season. I think what you guys lost, maybe you lost your first game. Who was that against in 2017?
Well, last year we lost by a point to Georgia week 2 at home.
Right. Now, so after that, I think it was during the after game press conference, and he was snapping at the reporters and sort of coming off very, very bad, and people like Paul Feinbaum and these other talking heads on ESPN and Fox Sports and stuff were saying this guy is he's a loose end. He's not representing Notre Dame well. He's got one foot out the door, and then really ever since that game, he seems to have turned things around for the better.
I think we're what are we 22-3 or something the last 2 years?
Right.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
You were right. Being the coach at Notre Dame ages you worse than being a president. You're pulled from every direction. It's hard to win there, but everybody expects it. And I think, here's what I've been saying. I think it's taken Brian Kelly a long time to find the sweet spot and to find a comfort zone. And it's just delicate and hard. And he's fine. Like, 1 year he wants to be a tough guy, hard ass. The next year he's a player coach. There was all this kind of back and forth. And it seems like he's finally hit his stride, found a level he's comfortable functioning at that doesn't turn everybody off and offend everybody in and outside.
So, the thing about his personality, he first of all, he's not a very likable guy from the outside. First of all, personally, I don't know him. You don't know him. He might be a great guy. I'm sure he is. But his personality, as far as the media goes, is very callous. And he's not very likable. But the thing is, like, somebody like Nick Saban is similar with the media. There's a big.
When you win, you can do whatever you want.
Exactly. Whenever you're winning, you can be a jerk, and everybody thinks it's great. When you're not winning and you're a jerk, then you're a jerk, and you need to go. So that's the.
I've been saying that for a long time. When you win, you could do whatever you want because you won.
Exactly.
But I will say this: his interactions with the media and the beat reporters and it's significantly more palatable now than it ever was any of the other years.
Yeah, he's definitely made a noticeable difference in the way he handles the media. There's no doubt about that.
So I credit him for mellowing, if you call it mellowing out or whatever he's doing. He's much more approachable now than he ever was. And it's hard to argue. The last 2 years have been really good years. Not great. You gotta win something for them to be great years. So they've been really good, but you got to win something for it to be great.
Well, listen, going 12-0 and making the playoffs, whether you lose or win, that's an accomplishment. I don't care what anybody says. How many teams out there, they're sitting around crying about not making the playoffs, whether they're Ohio State or Georgia? How many of them would love to be in Notre Dame's shoes right now, at least having a chance to play for the national championship? So whether or not you win the game or lose the game doesn't really matter. You still made it to the big show, and that's really half the battle. Now, of course, you're not going to be happy losing if you lose.
Yeah, but that's easy for you to say. You guys just won a title a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It's been 30 years for me.
Well, that's true, but I've been in that boat before, and last year was a heartbreaking loss we got absolutely killed by Alabama in the first round. So I know how it is to make it to the show and have all the expectations and then get disappointed. But I would much rather take that than not making it at all.
Here's the deal. The shadow of what Alabama did to Notre Dame in 2012, that still hangs over Notre Dame because it's the last time they were in this position. That's what people go to in their minds. And they're just a lot of people have it made up. That's what it still is, even though it's 6 years later.
With all due respect, that's ridiculous. The team is not the same from year to year, let alone for 6 years. That's just people need to let go of that. It's just not the same at all.
And for the Notre Dame fan base, I think there's a lot of people in this boat. it's very clear to me the program's in a much better place in every single way than it was 6 years ago.
Yeah.
At the same time, Brian Kelly's still Brian Kelly, and a lot of people are in I'll believe it when I see it mode, because until you win one of these big games, you haven't won one, and he hasn't won one.
Well, that is true. You're judged by what you've done today, and that's always going to be the case. But it's better than being the Gamecocks. And if you win 9 games, then everybody's excited. Your expectations are to go to the playoffs and win titles, and that's a good place to be in, no matter who you are. So.
And it's true. Notre Dame doesn't have any division banners to raise or any conference banners to raise.
Right.
You either win a title or you're out. You're done.
Right.
It's nothing.
Well, love them or hate them, Notre Dame is one of the most talked about and controversial programs in America. And believe me, I spent a lot of time talking about them, even when they haven't been a problem or somebody that Clemson has to face. So I know firsthand how that goes. Now, before we get off the phone, I do want to talk. Obviously, a lot of the reason people are tuning into this is because they want to hear us talk about this matchup that's coming up here next week. Hell, this thing's coming up quick, isn't it?
I can't believe it. I know. And then you have the holidays, so it's going to be a quick week next week, too.
Yeah.
It's creeping up on us.
So the Cotton Bowl. First of all, I will say I'm happy it's the Cotton Bowl, not the Orange Bowl, because Clemson hasn't been in the Cotton Bowl in a very long time, and I think that playing at Jerry's World is going to be awesome. I mean, I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that's going to be one hell of a scene and probably a great, great game to watch on TV.
Well, the way Notre Dame fans look at it is our last 2 trips down to Miami ended in disaster against Alabama on the big stage and then getting annihilated by Miami last year on the big stage. So if we can avoid that, I'm fine with going to Texas.
All right, so let's look at these 2 teams, and obviously we're both very biased, but we're going to try to attempt not to be right now, and I'll do my best not to be. Clemson's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. Now, forgive me, I did not even look this up or write this down, but I do know, as far as Clemson goes, that they have a top 10 offense and defense in America, top 5 offense and a top 10 defense in America. So they're very balanced on both sides of the ball. But let's look at Clemson's offense versus Notre Dame's defense. Now, what you may know this. What is Notre Dame's defense ranked nationally after the end of the year?
I thought I had that written down. It's not going to match up top 5, top 10 like Clemson's offense is.
Right.
But I do know this. They're one of only 2 teams in the country that held every opponent they played to 27 points or less.
Okay.
And so the defense for Notre Dame, it was the rock. Okay, they would have lost 2, maybe more games if it wasn't for this defense. And so what I'll say is I don't think they're amazing in any particular area, but they're not weak in really any area either. They are just a solid defense that does what it takes to get through games.
Yeah, and that's the impression that I got without looking at rankings, just from the games I watched, is that Notre Dame, like you said, they don't have, the Dexter Lawrence or the Cleveland Farrell or the big name, first round top 10 draft pick guys on the defensive line or anything like that, but they are solid at every single position from the defensive line all the way back to the safety, and that they don't really give up big plays on a regular basis, and they just are solid. And that's one of the reasons that you're 12-0. It probably has a lot to do with how solid your defense is, because people love.
It is. And the other thing is they have a lot of upper-class senior leadership on defense, and some guys that have brought young kids along, and that's a big part of it. They have some really strong leaders there, and it really is. It's the most.
I think we lost him. Call him back real quick. You probably accidentally hung up.
I'm sorry about that. I
That's
don't know
all right.
what happened.
Go ahead. Just go ahead and where you left off. It's all good.
Sorry about that. They do have some talent that they usually don't quite have, like in each area. You have Jerry Tillery and Khalid Kareem on the D line that are really good players, making a lot of plays. Tavon Coney and Drew Tranquil in the middle, and Julian Love in the secondary, and those are some guys that have developed into really great players that we usually don't have all at the same time.
Yeah.
And so those guys are kind of the rock, and they just do enough to win every week.
Yeah. And so the way that I've broke this thing down very loosely, and I'm not, without it getting any real specific player-by-player matchup or anything like that, is that, you know, Clemson's offense is as balanced as it gets in college football. I mean, we've got a running game that can compete with any running game in America, a wide receiver core that I believe is the best wide receiver core in America. And listen, we got a dynamic, probably going to be the first pick overall when he comes out in a couple of years, quarterback in Trevor Lawrence, but he is a true freshman. He's only got 12 games under his belt. Not 12, hell, 4 of those games he only played half the time. So that is his Achilles heel, is the fact that he's young and hasn't really started an entire season. But having said that, Notre Dame's got a tall task on their hands to stop Clemson's offense because you've got to load the box to stop Etienne and Feaster and Choice. And if you don't, then they're going to run all over you. But if you do, then that opens up the passing game for Lawrence and these elite wide receivers. So it's a catch-22 for Notre Dame's defense. Now, if you have the guys, the horses on the outside, a cornerback and in safety that can cover one-on-one, which is going to be a tall task, then that gives you a shot to compete on defense with Clemson's offense. If you're not able to stop the run, it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame.
That's been my position. I've been telling all the Notre Dame folks that there is. I think Clemson may be literally the most balanced offensive team in the country. And so here's how I'm thinking of it. Is I think that if your running game has anything resembling like even a really good effort, Notre Dame loses. They just cannot afford to let Etienne run all over them. Number one priority for Notre Dame has to be do whatever you got to do to stop the run, make the freshman beat you with his arm, and if he does, you tip your cap. I think that has to be the way they're going to do it.
Right. So now,
I just don't see another way.
Listen, I agree, and I don't think that's a hot take. I agree with you. I think that probably every professional analyst in America agrees with everything you just said, and you're basically reiterating the same feelings that I have. So let's flip it the other way now. We've got Notre Dame's offense, which I think is highly underrated, by the way, against Clemson's defense. Now, Clemson's defense is one of the – now, people would say that they underperformed this year because of the expectations that they had coming out with 4 first-rounders or at least 3 first-rounders on the defensive line, and the front seven's amazing. The Clemson's defense problems have been this year and have been for several years now on the back end, mainly at the safety position. And we've been exploited by Texas A&M. We've been exploited by Syracuse. And, of course, we got exploited big time by South Carolina on the back end, throwing the deep pass. And I would say if Wimbush was the guy that was leading the charge here, I wouldn't be that worried. But being the fact that Ian Book is the guy going into this game, and he is healthy, right? Is Book healthy?
He is healthy, and if he wasn't, he should be after all these weeks.
Right.
You know, he did get dinged up worse than what everybody thought versus Northwestern. That was a rest of the regular season injury he played through that Notre Dame did not want a lot of people to know how banged up he was.
Right. But if Book is able, first of all, it's sort of similar to the other way around with Clemson. If they're able to run the ball, it's going to be a long day for Notre Dame. Well, I expect the same sort of thing. Now, Clemson has the number 1 rush defense in America. We only allow like 2 yards per carry on defense. That leads the nation.
It's like 2.3, 2.4, something
right.
like that.
So, but having said that, if Notre Dame is able, and you've got a couple of elite running backs, so you have the guys to do it, and the offensive line might be the best in America, at least up there in the top 3, Notre Dame's. If you're able to establish a run game where you're at least getting 3, 4, 5 yards per carry, which is no easy task against Clemson's defense, but if you're able to do that, that will definitely open things up for Book to throw the ball downfield, and we know he can do it, and we know that Clemson has struggled in the past this year with defending the deep ball. So that is the formula. with for Notre Dame to win this football game is not on defense, because I think that I don't care how good Notre Dame's linebackers are, how good of a pass rush they have. Listen, Clemson's offense is so dynamic. They're going to score 30 points, period. If you're able to keep up scoring with Clemson, and that's going to start with the run game to open up the pass, then this will be a football game that comes down to the end. That's the way I feel about it. And I think that Notre Dame has the guys to do it, without a doubt. It's just a question of execution, and will they be able to do it?
Here's my take on this, and you probably heard some of this from the preview episode I did on my channel. The matchup between Notre Dame's offensive line and Clemson's defensive front is the matchup of the game, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Okay, that is the matchup to me. That is I would say that's the number one, and number two is if Notre Dame could stop your run game. Those are the two most important matchups to me, the way I see it. And here's what I worry about. There have been a lot of times this year where Notre Dame kind of runs into a brick wall with that running game. 0 yards, -2, 0 yards. And then, boom, Dexter Williams on his own busts one for 78 yards. It skews the overall average, and then it looks like a good day at the office.
Yeah.
That makes me nervous in this kind of matchup, because you might still run into a wall and not pop that big one. And then you're in 3rd and long, and then that's tough sledding for Book at 3rd and 8 every time.
Yeah, first and second down are going to be critical for Notre Dame's offense. Absolutely.
And so that's my issue. And with the offensive line, I think Notre Dame fans are a little spoiled. I mean, we lost 2 first-round picks to the NFL last year off the line. And then their best offensive lineman this year is out for the season with injury in Alex Bars. And so once Bars got hurt, he was their best offensive lineman, and you already lost 2 guys to the draft. They've held up in pass pro well. There are certain matchups where the run game looks downright scary to me in a bad way. Pittsburgh did it to us, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If they cannot at least get enough yardage to make Clemson worry about it, it's going to be a really uphill struggle offensively. Yeah,
no, I agree. And I actually think that, and I don't ever, I don't ever want to say it because it's a 4-quarter football game, but I think that we will know within probably the first 15 minutes of play time in this football game who's going to win this game. And the reason I say, and I'm not being disrespectful when I say that, I mean that if it's obvious that Clemson's defensive line is winning in the trenches and controlling the line of scrimmage, I think the game's going to be over before it starts. Now, if we see that Notre Dame's able to run the football or get some pass protection on 3rd down and 3rd and long situations, if that's what it comes down to, then I think Notre Dame will have a legitimate shot. But I think that we'll learn a lot in the very first quarter of this game. And then, like I said, it's a 4-quarter game. Anything can happen, halftime's adjustments and all that sort of thing. But the first quarter of this game, I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I think it'll be critical as to what happens at the end.
I totally agree with that. I do think one matchup that does favor Notre Dame, especially you said if Clemson's defense does have a weakness, it tends to be on the back end.
Yeah.
Notre Dame does have some big, tall, athletic guys outside. They have just an absolute beast of a tight end that's quick and has good hands, and he's just a tank.
Yeah.
And then we have our own Hunter Renfrow and Chris Fink, basically. They kind of play the same role. And so those guys can make some plays and match up with anybody.
Yeah, that tight end you guys got, he is nasty. I remember watching him in several games this year. I mean, that guy is almost unguardable.
And you know what? It's about time because he's a senior. We've been waiting for this for all 4 years. He had academic trouble, was suspended a year, and it took him a long time to get it together, and now he's finally stepping up.
That guy's built like a shit brick house. He's huge.
Yes, he is, and he's fast, and he's got good hands. So that matchup over the middle is favorable. But all of that doesn't matter if you don't give Ian Book time.
Right.
And so that's it to me. That is the only thing I've been thinking about is I do believe in my heart our defense can keep us in this game. but if we can't find a way to at least do something around the line of scrimmage, whether it's short passes or misdirection, if your normal run plays aren't working, Notre Dame's got to find a way to spread Clemson out a little bit, or they are in huge trouble.
Yeah,
huge
and
trouble.
the X factor in this is, you just mentioned that, is finding a way to do something different than what you normally do. Is that Brian Kelly and Dabo Swinney, they played each other before. So Brian Kelly, first of all, he's a very good coach, especially X's and O's wise. I think that he'll have some wrinkles, and he knows how Clemson's style is. Clemson's style of play has not changed a single bit since 2015. It's the same schemes, the same coordinators. So Brian Kelly knows very well what he's going up against, and I think that he will try to throw some wrinkles in there. And of course he will. He's a good coach, and he wants to win the football game. And so I expect this. Listen, I expect this to be a good game. The line in Vegas was what? It's like at 11.5 now, and I think that it'll be closer than that. I picked Clemson to win by 7 is my official pick. But if this thing came down to 3 points or 6 points, it would not. Either way, no matter who wins, it would not surprise me one bit. I expect it to be a great game. I'd be very shocked if it was a one-sided on either side of the aisle.
I'm right. I cannot disagree with that prediction at all. I kind of think it'll be right in that range too. For Notre Dame fans, it would be really devastating if it went really, really bad the other way. I think we all think we're in a better place and we're more equipped to be able to play with Clemson and even potentially Alabama and not look the way it did in 2012, the last time they were in this position. So I totally agree with your kind of where your pick prediction is, and I'm right with you. I can't disagree with any of it.
Yeah, great. All right, man. Well, listen, first of all, this has been great. I really want to thank you for taking the time out to come on here and speak with me. I've been looking forward to it. And I want to give, for anybody, a Notre Dame fan who's watching, I want to give all my praise to Notre Dame. I can't praise Notre Dame any more than I already have, and if I do, it's going to make me sick. But yeah, Notre Dame absolutely belongs where they are, and I think it's going to be a great game, and I'm really looking forward to it. And listen, no matter what happens, if Clemson loses this game, I'm not going to be ashamed. I'll be disappointed. I will not be ashamed of Clemson's season. Listen, we've been to the playoffs 4 years in a row now. We won a national title a couple of years ago, and obviously that's what we want to do again this year. But losing to Notre Dame would not be shameful, in my opinion, in the playoff. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, I think that you should feel the same way. You went 12-0, which is something you haven't done since 2012. You played one of the more difficult schedules, not team-wise, but just logistically, flying all over the country, playing all these different conferences. It's no small feat that you went 12-0. And to beat somebody like Clemson in a playoff situation is not an easy thing. So whether or not you win or lose the game, you should hold your head high. Now, join a conference. That's all I'm going to say about that.
You're still going to go back to that.
Yes, join a conference. I got to throw my jab in there at some point.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fair. But I will say this in regards to your channel. I was drawn to it because of your fairness. Okay, and that's something that's really hard to find in politics, in American sports, whatever. And so I appreciate your willingness to sit back and see kind of from a Notre Dame perspective and give them some respect. Sometimes I feel like they're, even when they deserve it, they don't get it, and so yeah. I appreciate your openness to be fair to Notre Dame.
Well, that's just me being me. If I felt different, I would say different, but believe me, there are plenty of people that don't think I'm fair, and they think I'm just a homer and I'm biased, and that's because I'm saying stuff about their team that they don't like. It just so happens that I feel the way I do about the way Notre Dame is, and that works out. But anyway, I appreciate your kind words about my channel. And everybody, please make sure you go check out Always Irish. All of my viewers, go check him out. He's got a good thing going over there, and you need to hit the subscribe button and check my man out. Support who supports the Pigskin Pete show. And so thank you, man. I really appreciate it. I look forward to, in the future, maybe after the game's over or whatever, we can get back together and talk about some football some more. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, and have a great holiday season, you and your family, and sit back and enjoy some bowl games.
All right, man. Have a great day. Thank you.
Take care.
So there you have it, folks. I only plan on doing about a 20-minute, 30-minute talk with him, but it's not every day that I get a Notre Dame guy on the phone and somebody who is not a complete and total douchebag. So thank you to him for that. I really appreciate that. It was great of him to come on. I hope you guys all enjoyed it, and hopefully I can get up with him again here in the future after the game, no matter who wins, and see how this thing works out. Phone call. Anyways, thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Always Irish. Everybody go check him out on YouTube, Always Irish. Hit the subscribe button. Have a great day.